So in this second example of the hot sauce case, the candidate here is a junior at an undergraduate institution. The candidate has practiced a decent number of cases, and in this particular case, he has performed pretty well. I would give the candidate an A, meaning that the candidate has a chance of getting an offer from a top consulting firm. The key reason for the successful case on the candidate's side was a combination of things, and these things you should be aware of when you listen to the case. The candidate was very hypothesis driven, first of all, and mentioned the word hypothesis many times during the case. Second of all, he was very good at conversing and holding conversation, and during the case had very minimal gaps in his thought process, and gave very logical summaries and deductions along the case with every new piece of information. So these points, combined with a strong math calculation and a very strong final recommendation, put him over the top. So listen to these things as you go deeper into the case. All right, so John is the owner of a hot sauce shop in Manhattan. Now, the type of hot sauce he produces can be used for all kinds of different culinary purposes. Over the 10 years where he has done this business, he has experienced both revenue and profit increases. However, this year, for whatever reason, his profit has declined. So you're a friend of his, you're a friend of John's,
Okay.
and knowing your background in business consulting, he really wants your help.
Okay, so just to clarify, basically, just to sum up what you told me so far, so a friend named John, he runs a hot sauce shop in Manhattan, selling hot sauce for various culinary uses, and even though over the past 10 years, his revenue and profit has been good, but recently this year, his profit has declined, and he wants me to look at essentially what's going on and how to turn it around. Is that correct?
It's perfect.
Okay, are there any other objectives I should be aware about?
No.
No?
Let's take a quick pause here. Notice that the candidate asked something very subtle. Are there any other objectives I should be aware about? This is a question that is wise to ask in certain types of cases to verify the key objective of the client. For example, and just hypothetically here, a US-based pencil manufacturer wants to enter the South American market, and specifically the country of Chile, and wants a market entry strategy from you. For this type of question, it is wise to ask what is the key objective for the client, or what factors, if met, would make the client's endeavors successful. Does the pencil manufacturer want to garner as much profit as possible in the first year, or is it as much revenue as possible? Or is the manufacturer okay with having profit losses for the first couple of years as long as it can gain a lot of market share in the Chilean pencil market? Therefore, in this type of case, asking a question such as, are there any other objectives I should be aware about, as the candidate asked, or something along the lines of, what is the key objective for the client, can really verify the problem statement and guide you in the right direction to solve the case.
Okay, so one point of clarification, so what's John's business model? Like, how is he making money? Is it just simply through like regular just selling bottles of hot sauce, or is there maybe like a subscription service for different like restaurants and things? How is he making money?
Right, great question. So yeah, so he just basically sells per bottle. So he has a bunch of hot sauce stored up in his store, and then people would come over and buy his hot sauce, and then and then he just per bottle, he charges per bottle basically.
Okay, and also, does he sell only one type of hot sauce, or does he have multiple varieties?
Yeah, great question. So he has 3 types of hot sauce he currently sells.
Okay.
Hot sauce A, which is the chili pepper hot sauce. Hot sauce B, which is the Louisiana style hot sauce. And hot sauce C, which is the Texas homemade hot sauce.
Texas, nice. Okay, then in that case, could I take a bit of time to set up my framework?
Sure, please.
Okay, thank you.
Here I want to indicate another subtle point. The candidate ended his opening remarks by asking, "Can I take some time to lay out my framework?" The good thing about this question is that the candidate asked for permission to take some time and think about things. However, framework is a word that you should use with caution during a case interview, as it is tied to the notion that you have a specific pre-made type of method that you use for case interviews, and the same method that you use for different types of cases. By saying, "Can I take some time to lay out my framework?" it might be interpreted by the interviewer as, "Can I take some time to write out a case-solving method that I have prepared beforehand to solve your case?" Imagine that you are the interviewer here, interviewing your 10th candidate of the day after a grueling 8 hours. If you hear the word framework, what you might be thinking is that, here comes another candidate, tackling my custom-made case using his boring pre-made approach. It can make the interviewer conjecture that you are uncreative and that you use the same approach for all types of cases. Therefore, I recommend that the candidate stay away from the word framework. Instead, if I were the candidate, I would say something like this. This is a very interesting problem, and I definitely want to think hard about this. Can I take some time before I tell you how I would approach this problem?" Look and notice that saying it this way can make the interviewer have a better impression of you during the case.
Okay, so essentially what I have structured here is that, so we know that profit is revenue minus cost, as we know, and then we can break revenue into its unit of basically like price and volume, and then we can break up cost into fixed costs and variable costs. So I'll be attacking this problem from each of those 4 points to essentially assess what the problem might be.
Okay.
And then from there, I'll proceed with a recommendation about the overall thing. So first off, I'd like to start with a revenue analysis. So you've told me these 3 products. Could I get a breakdown for how much revenue contribution each product has toward John's overall bottom line?
Here, I want to comment on the candidate's initial structure, and I want to go deeper into one thing that the candidate did well and one thing that the candidate completely missed. What the candidate did well was that the candidate noticed that this is a profitability problem, and at the end of the day, to figure out the decrease in profit, he has to figure out what the revenues and costs are and the detailed trends within revenues and costs. So he accelerated his problem solving by immediately tackling specifically these numbers. This is an approach that I totally recommend to all of the candidates, which is to dive immediately into the quantitative numbers associated with the revenue and the cost and figure out which segments are causing the profit decline. However, what the candidate is missing here is that he is not asking the more business situation or business sense type of questions that are equally as significant in a case interview. At the end of the day, to solve a case, you not only have to figure out what the numbers are, but also have to use those numbers to explain, verify, or solve an actual business problem. And you can't solve the actual business problem if you don't ask questions to understand what the business actually is. So after asking about the revenue and the cost of the business, what I would do is to then ask some of these business situation questions. So just to illustrate this point, I have attached a framework to a profitability problem that I find is most comprehensive to open any profitability type of case, as this approach encompasses both the quantitative number part of the case as well as the business situation part of the case. And just as a bonus, in the next 2 minutes, I will record myself as an excellent example of how I would frame my initial structure to this case. In my example, please note how I covered both the profitability part of the case as well as the business situation part of the case, and that I have thrown in some hypotheses for the case as well. Cool. So this problem that the client of the hot sauce shop is having is fundamentally a profitability type of problem. And profitability can be broken down into revenue and cost. And within revenue, the price that we're charging for the hot sauce, as well as the volume that we are selling. And for the cost, the volume and the cost per hot sauce. And we can further break that down into fixed and variable costs. So I definitely want to first dig into these profitability numbers and figure out the key trends within revenue and costs within this past year. However, at the end of the day, this is a business problem, and I also want to understand what is the fundamental business situation that is causing the profitability decline. And specifically, I want to take a look at 5 major business categories: the market, the customers, our product, our company, and our competition. On the market side, I would like to understand if the profitability decline is only for our company, or is it for all the other hot sauce shops in Manhattan? One of my hypotheses here I want to throw out is perhaps, and only perhaps, that people in Manhattan are starting to switch from hot sauce to sriracha sauce. And because of that, the sales and profits of all hot sauce shops, including our shop, has declined. On the competition side, I want to understand who are our competitors and what are their shares of the Manhattan hot sauce market. And another possible reason for the profit decline might be that another hot sauce store opened right across the street from us, and that has taken away both our revenues and our profits. So I want to understand these underlying business situations that we're dealing with, along with things that are happening with our customers, products, and our company, to pinpoint the problem and solve the problem later on. To begin, I want to first dig into the numbers with profitability, and more specifically, you mentioned our profit has declined this past year. Do we know if it is because our revenue has increased, our costs have decreased, or a combination of both? And by how much have we experienced these increases and decreases? Okay, so the revenue contribution, yeah. So what we have is the overall total volume of bottles sold have increased by 10%.
The overall volume.
Yeah.
So do we not have a total? I mean, do we not have a percent, like the amount that increased for
each of them?
For each of them?
Right. So yeah.
Products?
So yeah. Follow my lead here. So the overall volume has increased by 10%.
Okay.
Our total revenue has jumped up by about 60%. So given those numbers, what do you think?
Okay. So basically, you told me that the total volume has jumped up by 10%, but the total revenue has jumped up by 60%. So it seems like one of the bottles, which is very high priced, is experiencing the bulk of the increase in terms of, is contributing to the bulk of the revenue increase. Would that be correct? Or
Wait, is that your conclusion, or is it a hypothesis?
it's a hypothesis that I have.
Why do you think that is?
Because if essentially these were, assuming that these were all similarly priced, then a 10% jump in volume would essentially scale linearly with, well, it would scale linearly regardless. However, since this jump is rather dramatic, 10% to 60%, my hypothesis is that one of the bottles, which mainly is would be more expensive, which would then thereby contribute more to the revenue, would therefore be generating this. However, of course, I'd like to hear if that's correct to validate that. Or
Right, exactly. And so what data would you need to validate that hypothesis?
so I'd need to know the prices of the ABC, and also if possible, just like how the revenue trends for those three different products.
Okay, that sounds good. So what about, our profits have declined, right?
Yes.
And given the fact that our revenue and volumes have increased,
yes.
Why might profit actually have declined?
So yes, you bring up a good point, and one thing I have, because this again seems strange that revenue has increased, so it leads me to believe that costs may be an issue here.
Okay.
So our costs may have increased beyond our total revenue percentage.
Got you.
Yes.
And then to validate that, what else would you need?
So to validate that, I need to learn more about like the costs that go into like this, like creating the hot sauce. So like, for example, the materials costs, so like the chili peppers and materials involved with that, bottling costs, labor costs, the cost of the machines to do all those things, just to get a sense of what exactly is contributing to the cost of making this hot sauce.
Okay, gotcha. So yeah, great. So yeah, I like where you're going. I like the data that you need. So to tell you basically, we have data on the price that we charge.
Okay.
One of your first hypotheses was that one of the prices of one of the hot sauces are more than the other, right?
Yes.
So chili pepper hot sauce is priced at $5 a bottle.
Okay.
Louisiana style hot sauce is priced at $6 a
Okay.
bottle, and Texas homemade hot sauce is priced at $12 a bottle.
12.
So, and then
Very
in
interesting.
terms of the volume that we sell,
Okay.
we actually have some data. So please take a look and let me know what you think.
That's interesting. Okay, so I have two main takeaways, and I have a question for you, but we'll first start with the takeaway. So the first thing that I noticed right off the bat is that our sauce volumes for both A and B have declined essentially, while C, would I be correct in assuming that basically last year, essentially this year, Texas was newly introduced into our product mix.
Okay.
So, which has led to a 20,000 jump, obviously. So 20,000 units were sold.
Okay.
And so it's interesting that it seems like there is some cannibalization from hot sauce A and hot sauce B.
Right.
And also another interesting thing that I noted. So, given what you told me, here with the volume and also the price numbers, it seems that essentially since C is being sold more and also had seen the biggest jump in terms of volume,
right.
It seems like that's one potential reason why we're seeing a big jump in our revenue.
Well, why is it a potential reason? It is a reason.
Yes, it is a it's a solid reason. There may be other ancillary factors, but from my current analysis, this seems like a major reason for our jump. But now there is one question I want to ask. So why is it that we're seeing these decreases? So there is cannibalization, but I just have a question about why this might be happening, given that these are pretty different tasting types of things. Cajun is very different from Texas, which is very different from just a standard chili. So do you have any information on why this potential cannibalization is happening?
Here the candidate said something that I would applaud. The candidate said, "Do you know why this cannibalization is happening?" This is what I call the why question. And why questions are something very distinct from what questions. The what question would be, what is the price for products? What are the volumes? What are the trends for the revenue and cost? Whereas the why questions are drilling into the profit and the fundamental reasons behind why something is happening, instead of simply observing what is happening. Here, notice something very important in case interviews is that solving the numbers doesn't solve the case. And getting all the numbers correct wouldn't guarantee that you pass the case. You not only have to get all the numbers correct, but also need to understand why these numbers are acting the way they do to pass an actual interview. In this particular instance, the candidate noticed that by introducing a new product C, the volumes for A and B have actually decreased. A rookie candidate or a mediocre candidate in this case would simply assume that cannibalization happened and that the decrease is a natural, logical outcome of introducing a new product. However, this candidate, who is a top tier candidate, asked the why question and asked why specifically did A and B decrease. An even better response, which would put the candidate to be the cream of the crop, would be to say something like this. So I noticed that by introducing the product C, the volumes of A and B have decreased. Do we know particularly why this has happened, other than just a cannibalization effect? More specifically, one of my hypotheses here might be that the customers who buy product C are the same customers who buy products A and B, and we're actually not attracting new customers and new revenues, and are simply giving a new option to our customers to choose from, which would most definitely decrease the sales of our old sauces. To ask a why question like I just did would be the best question that you can ask, because it gives the interviewer your thinking on why this might be happening instead of simply asking for the reason. Okay, so why the cannibalization is happening? Well, I mean, it's just we don't know.
You don't
know.
Okay.
We don't really know. We just rolled out this new sauce, and it seems like our previous two sauces are decreasing in terms of sales volumes. So we don't know.
Okay, then I think I'll drill a little bit deeper to just try and see. So do we see that maybe our new customers, our repeat customers continuing to buy A and B, or are they switching towards C? Or do we have an influx of new customers that are perhaps just have preferences towards C, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, it's a mix of repeating customers and new customers. So we don't really track our customers. So this is what we noticed in terms of a yearly sales volume.
Fair enough.
Right. So I guess why? We have the numbers. Seems like numbers wise, Texas Homemade is doing well. In terms of sales volume, right?
Yes.
So what? Based on kind of what we've experienced as a problem and what we've seen, what other insights or which other direction do you want to go to?
Yes. So basically, since you told me that revenue is increasing and this new sauce, it's priced at $12, and I'm assuming that higher price, my hypothesis is that higher price is also due to the fact that it costs more to produce basically C. So I'd like to learn a bit more about the cost associated with producing each bottle.
Okay.
Of the different types, varieties.
Okay, and then how would that tie back to the original objective that we have as a case?
So essentially, if our costs for A and B are pretty low, but then with C, basically if the costs are much higher, then our percent margin, our profit margin is going to be decreased if we're selling more of C than A and B, because of that fact, if the margin is in fact lower for C than it is for A and B.
Gotcha. And is that a hypothesis that you have?
It's one potential hypothesis, and it's an area I'd like to explore more to validate that.
Right. What about another one?
Okay.
That might be causing the profit decline.
Yeah. So another one that I can think of is that we also don't know a whole lot about how the industry overall, how other competitors are potentially doing. So perhaps competition from them, we have to spend more on say marketing, or we have to spend more on our distribution channels, getting our product out there. And that's also eating into our profit because we have to spend more money to compete in a sense. So that's another hypothesis I have.
Got you. So I think I'm hearing that in terms of fixed costs and variable costs, you're saying perhaps the variable costs of these bottles are higher for C versus A and B, or if that's not the case, it might be the fixed cost with marketing and something like that might be increasing as well, right?
So those are two current hypotheses I've playing around.
Yeah, that's very valid. So to kind of answer your request for data, we have some extra data on the cost for the hot sauces. So please take a look and let me know about your insights, and then afterwards please calculate how much has our profits decreased from last year to this year.
Okay. 50. So just to clarify again, so first give you the takeaways that I get from this. and then also after that, calculate how much profit has declined, correct?
Okay.
So after giving you the takeaways?
Yes, please.
Okay. So right off the bat, looking at these numbers, I have essentially, this data does seem to confirm my original hypothesis that the profit margin for C may have been lower than it is for A and B, since as we can see here, for A, we have a profit margin of $4, for B, we have a profit margin of $2.50, and then for C, we only have a profit margin of $1. So if we're selling a lot more of C, we're going to be making less profit overall than we would for A and B.
Okay.
So this does seem to confirm my original suspicions. So is it okay if I first take a moment to set up how I'm going to proceed to tell you how much profit has declined?
No problem.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so just could I walk you through how I'm going to proceed with this just so you can see if I'm on the right track?
Sure.
Okay, so what I'm essentially going to do for each of the 2 years, I'm going to first calculate the unit profit by subtracting price minus cost and then multiplying that by the volume of each year. And I'm going to basically do that for A, B, and C and then sum them all up. And then from there, once I have the bulk numbers for each of these years, I'm going to subtract the two from each other.
All right, no problem. That sounds good.
Okay, awesome. So could I take a few more moments to actually do the calculation?
Yeah, sure.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Here, I want to take a step back and evaluate how the candidate approached a calculation. Before digging deeper into calculation on the profit decline, the candidate explained to me the procedure that he was going to take to do the calculation before actually plugging in the numbers. This is very important because you want to verify with the interviewer that your procedure is correct before spending extra time to do an otherwise worthless calculation. However, it is not always necessary to explain your procedure upfront when doing a calculation. And I want to go a little bit deeper here to explain the situations where I would split a calculation into 2 parts, explaining and then plugging numbers, versus just doing the 2 of them all together. And the key variable to optimize here is the amount of time it takes you to finish a particular calculation. The faster you finish, the faster you can move on to the next thing in the case, and the better chance that you have on passing the case. So if at the beginning of a calculation, you anticipate the calculation to only going to last you 30 to 45 seconds, what I would do is to trust my method and finish the calculation before explaining the procedure and the numbers all together to the interviewer. However, if I anticipate that a calculation would cost me 2 to 3 minutes, then I would break the calculation down into 2 parts, explaining the procedure first before actually plugging in the numbers. The reason I wouldn't spend time to explain my procedure upfront in a shorter type of calculation is that even if I do the calculation incorrectly, it would only take me a very short amount of time to correct it. Whereas I definitely would explain my procedure upfront for a longer calculation because the cost of getting it incorrectly is significantly higher, or in upwards of 2 to 3 minutes of time. So when you are doing calculations, always be aware and anticipate how much time it will take you, and let that be a guide to your specific strategy on how you would do the calculation.
Actually, I just realized something. Actually, I'm going to, instead of doing this, I'm going to subtract the 2 volumes from here, since the unit profit is the same for both years. So essentially, this will be the delta of the volume for each A, B, and C.
Sure.
to get the overall profit decline.
Sure, yeah,
Yes.
Just let me know how much the profit has declined.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so from my analysis of subtracting like the volumes between each year for basically for the A, B, and C, I've determined that we lost $25,000 in terms of profit.
So can you go a little bit deeper on the numbers?
Yes, of course. So essentially what I did is that I took the year one costs, I mean, not the year one volumes and the year two volumes. So for each of the ones, so for example, A was 15K, year two volumes from year one volume. So 15K for year two for A, 20K for year one for A. So that's basically negative 5K, which multiplied by 4 is negative 20K. So then, and then for B, so 20K minus 30K. So then that's negative 10K times 25, which is 25K.
Sure.
And then this is 20 minus 0 times 1, so that's 20K. And now, so basically A and C cancel out since negative 20 and 20, which leaves us with only B, which gives us negative 25K.
Well, how much of
in terms of profit.
Okay, so what do you see from that number? Here the candidate had very messy notes, and as a result, it is pretty hard to interpret what the candidate is trying to do. So what I've done here is that I've created a separate note explaining what the candidate was trying to do originally, what he was trying to do after using a quicker method, and furthermore, an even better way to do this calculation that I would do. As you can see on the left of the page, what the candidate was trying to do before was to calculate the profit that we had last year by multiplying the volume we were selling by the profit per unit that were sold, and then calculate the new profit this year and find the difference of the two for the loss in profit. Then the candidate quickly realized that there is a common multiplier here, which is the profit per unit. So it is quicker to do this calculation by using the distributive property of multiplication, which is to extract the common multiplier and simply multiply the profit per unit by the difference in the volume sold. As you can see, it is a much quicker and more simplified way to do the calculation. But last but not least, on the very right, I wrote out a way that I would do the calculation and an even better way to do it. Even though this third way represents the same information as the way that the candidate was trying to do the calculation, the tabulated format of my methodology is what stands out and is a lot clearer to the interviewer and will imprint a very good impression on the interviewer both within the case and after the case when the interviewer is reviewing your notes. So the third way, in a tabulated format, is what I would recommend people to do in their calculations.
Yes, so what this is telling me essentially is that our profits are declining, have declined from year one to year two by 25,000, and it does in fact seem like this is the case because even though we're getting more volume with like this entry of the new product, because the profit margin is so low, it's essentially it's cannibalizing from our other products, which is causing the drop in those volumes. But then even beyond that, it's not even generating enough profit to be able to cancel out the loss in profit from cannibalization.
Right. What about in terms of the total profit? How many percentage are we down?
Okay.
From last year to this year?
Okay.
Based on
So from a percentage-wise number, that would be.
Just quickly on the calculation.
So that's a 50% decrease.
You sure? How do you get that number?
Oh, my apologies. Yes, that. Okay, so yes, my apologies. So given our year one totals from, so we didn't have C, so that's why that is 0. Our A, year one was 20K. and then times a profit margin of 4. For B, it was a basically total 30K times 2.5 in terms of profit margin. So then that becomes 80 plus 75, which is equal to 155K. To simplify the math, I rounded that to 150. So that makes roughly 1/6, which is roughly equal to 16%. So we've seen a 16% decrease in profit from year one.
Here, I want to take a moment and assess two things. One is rounding numbers, and two is what to do after you've come out with a number. These subtle things on how you handle numbers say a lot to the interviewer on what a candidate you are or what a potential consultant you may be. Here, what the candidate simply said was, so I rounded 155 to 150, and 25 over 150 is 1/6, which is 16%. The candidate is not wrong in rounding numbers from 155 to 150. However, the way that the candidate phrased it seemed like he was trying to avoid doing complex calculation by simply making it easier for himself. What I would do in this situation would be to request a subtle validation with the interviewer on if my rounding is okay. Most of the time, the interviewer will approve of the rounding, but you don't want to come across to the interviewer that you are deliberately avoiding difficult calculations. Second thing I want to assess here is the importance of asking yourself the so what question after you come out with a number. In this situation, the profit decline was 16%, and the candidate simply said, okay, after my calculation, the profit decreased by 16%. But a better candidate would respond by analyzing that percentage in the bigger picture, either by comparing it to a profitability goal that the client is hoping to accomplish in the future, or just by commenting on the sheer magnitude of the profit decrease. If I was the candidate, this is what I would say. So the profit this year compared to last year decreased by 16%, which is not insignificant, but also not impossible to recover. If we have potential to increase prices as well as decrease costs, there is still hope for us to turn it around very quickly as a business. Remarks like these that I've just said would tell the interviewer that you're grasping the magnitude of the numbers and relating the numbers to the actual business instead of looking at numbers just as pure math.
Okay. All right, sure. So, okay, that sounds good. So it seems like we're declining in profit.
Yes.
So what next?
Yeah. So since it seems that we've identified the basically the problems given with this, I would like to ask, why are the costs for basically brand C so high? Since it seems like, again, our profit margins for A and B are pretty good, but for C, like $11, that's pretty high.
Right. And then okay, so let me tell you. So we introduced this new sauce this year, right? This is the first year. The other two sauces we've done it for 10 years.
Yes.
So we have a good recipe, a good assembly line, everything. The variable cost is lower. Whereas for this new sauce, the first year, it takes some time for us to set up everything to lower the variable cost.
I see.
Yeah.
So what variable costs are we having trouble lowering currently?
Yeah, it's just a combination of the people we hire labor-wise, and then we actually have a warehouse a couple blocks away from our shop, and we set up a assembly, like a process. When you mix materials, you put materials in the bottle, cork it, and things of that nature. So yeah, it's just a combination of labor and the process.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's good to know. So just to summarize what we've learned so far.
Sure.
So it seems like there has been a decrease in profit despite an increase in revenue. And digging deeper from that, we've seen that that's because of a basically increased sale in Texas, the Texas hot sauce, product C, which has a much lower profit margin than A and B has. And from what you've told me so far is that one reason why cost is so high currently is because since it's a new recipe, essentially there are a lot of variable costs that need to be ironed out as you guys improve the process and things like that.
Exactly.
Yes.
So given all that, what would you do? Kind of what would you what would, you know, a logical thing that John should do? I don't know. Like, what should he do? Like, should he continue with sauce C? Should he take out sauce B? What to do?
Yeah. So essentially, well, one thing, I think that product C is still generating profits. It's just that the only problem is it's not generating enough right now. And from what I've been told, like there is still a process of basically reducing those costs, and that's an ongoing process. So in terms of the long term, I think ultimately we should be relatively okay, contingent on if those costs can be reduced to a point where we can do well in terms of profit.
Right.
However, in terms of like for the short term, so one thing we can do, we could potentially try testing out adjusting the price to see if perhaps it might lead to, it would, like if we increase the price but decrease the volume, perhaps we might sell more. I mean, we might get a better profit in total profit by doing like the price manipulations.
Sure.
Another thing we could potentially do is we could try to seek out if there are potentially ways to save costs in other spaces. So like perhaps with shipping or
those costs have been the same. Yeah.
No, those costs have been the same. Okay,
yes.
So there's not much meat there to trim. There's not much fat to trim away at. Okay, then another potential thing that we can do is, again, since we did see that there is the potential problem with cannibalization, one thing we could do is that we could market these different sauces for very distinct uses so that we have less of a risk of cannibalization. So like, for example, for Texas, we could promote it as just like something that's absolutely perfect for barbecue, and which Louisiana style and chili peppers don't have as much like ground in those areas. Or perhaps like with Louisiana style, like we can say like this is the best to go with like perhaps like fried food or Cajun, like jambalaya, things like that. So marketing them for different uses would help reduce the cannibalization that we're seeing here, and thus would help essentially increase our profits overall in that respect.
Got you. So
Yes.
so you're saying we shouldn't take away this new sauce C.
Yeah, and in my opinion, given the analysis that we have, and given the fact that you said that, because you guys have been in the business for a while and you have A and B and you guys know how to reduce costs, I'm fairly confident it's a matter of time until you guys are able to reduce costs so that the profit margin, basically, this profitability problem will ultimately disappear.
Okay, so let me give you some background, right?
Okay.
So we introduced the sauce C, which is Texas homemade, because there has been a new competitor in town.
Okay.
The new competitor is called Joe's Hot Sauce, and they're based out of a hot sauce chain on the West Coast, and they're opening kind of one of their first stores on the East Coast in Manhattan. They have good sauce, and their customers have positive feedbacks. It seems like they're doing pretty well.
Okay.
So that's kind of why we rolled out sauce C, because it seems like from the customers, Joe's Hot Sauce has a lot of new flavors that are very refreshing to the East Coast customers, and we wanted to roll out a new sauce to compete with Joe's. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes.
But let me tell you, you said not to take out sauce C. Let me tell you why you're wrong.
Okay.
Because we're only having $1 profit margin. We're selling a bunch of them. So so if we run this for a couple of years, we'd be losing a lot of profits, and we don't have a lot of cash reserves. So I think if I'm John, and with what you've recommended me, you're totally wrong, because we'd be losing losing profits every year and eating away our assets. Don't you agree?
Right at this moment, I challenged the candidate on his recommendation to keep sauce C, and I vehemently voiced my opinion and deliberately told him that he was wrong. This is what I call, in case interviews, the ultimate consultant challenge, where the interviewer, or the client, if this is an actual consulting project, is challenging the validity of the work that you do or the strength of the strategy that you proposed. The key when you are being given this ultimate consultant challenge is to stand your ground. And I say it again, stand your ground. This really comes down to consulting as a job, where many of the strategies that you propose albeit all backed up by numbers, is still very subjective. So as a consultant, you are not only selling a strategy, but you are also selling your confidence in the strategy. And the client wouldn't feel confident about your strategy if you change it every time the client gives you a challenge. Just as the interviewer would think that you are unfit as a consultant if you can't withstand the slightest poking and challenging on your recommendation. So whenever an interviewer says, "Let me tell you how you are wrong here," and challenges you on the strategy that you are giving, don't fall into the trap and simply change your strategy to what the interviewer wants. Instead, stand your ground, continue with what you have proposed, and give more explanation on why you firmly believe that your recommendation is the correct one. As you listen to the candidate responding, notice that the candidate stood his ground. And this kind of response is one that I would recommend people to follow suit in their own case interviews.
Well, you do bring up good points. Again, like this $1 profit margin is not ideal. And also from what you just told me, John doesn't have a whole lot of cash reserves. So he might not be able to eat this relatively low profit margin over an amount of time. However, also given what you told me, if there is indeed a new competitor in town and one of the draws is that basically their customers are attracted to new flavors and refreshing flavors, taking away our newest product and sticking with our old ones would not be something that it seems like customers want, because if they're attracted to new and basically these new flavors, then we will still need to have like new flavors. We can't just stick to our old products. And also furthermore, from what, like, as I said before in my analysis, if like A and B, you guys have done pretty well in like reducing the costs. So again, like you said, like currently A is now a profit margin of $4 per bottle and B is now a profit margin of 2.5 per bottle. Since you guys have had the experience in being able to optimize the chili pepper processes so that you can reduce the costs in that way, I think I am confident that given the expertise of being able to do that for 2 bottles, that basically this hot sauce company should be able to also do that for product C as well.
So after everything I've told you, you still think we should stick with C? Instead of, basically, I don't agree with it. I think we should take out C. You think we should stick with C?
Well, I think at the very least we should give it a chance. And if it seems that we absolutely can't reduce profits, then it might be a good idea to remove it. But given like the overall competitive situation as well as the experience, I think it's worth it right now to give it a chance.
Okay, that's fair. So how about this? How about, you said a lot of things in terms of recommendation. Can you kind of wrap it up, summarize, and take only 30 seconds, summarize and let me know.
Okay.
Let me know, give me an overall recommendation, what I should do moving forward.
Of course. Yeah, let me take just a few moments. Okay, so I'm ready to proceed with my recommendation.
Please tell me.
Okay, so first off, just to recap like our project statement. So originally our client was a hot sauce shop in Manhattan that had previously done well in terms of like revenue and profit, but this current year has experienced a decline in profit. So we wanted to look at what the problem was and how we can turn it around. So from our analysis, we determined that revenues were up, but profits were down. And the reason for that was because they were selling a lot more of sauce C, which had a lower profit margin than its previous 2 products. Okay. And that was thus causing the decline in profitability. Now, in terms of recommendations, there are a few things that this company can do. They can potentially market different uses for this overall product. So like, again, maybe Texas can be marketed for just like use in barbecue. Louisiana style can be used for marketing Cajun food. Hot sauce could be marketed for just like a general use for adding more spice. Another impossible recommendation that could happen is that we could investigate adjusting price of basically C to A, help with that increase the profit margin, as well as potentially, hopefully increase the overall profit.
Okay.
Of course, more investigation is necessary for that. And then lastly, another thing that I thought we could potentially do a joint venture. So we've heard before that basically customers are looking for new varieties. Another thing besides just new varieties of hot sauce, we could think of new varieties of ways to do hot sauce. So like, for example, one thing like Tapatio partnered with Lay's to introduce like Tapatio chips. So we could do a similar thing. So that gets our hot sauce out to more customers and also would help us compete against this new entry with Joe's.
Okay. All right. Is that all?
Yes, that's all.
All right. Thank you.
What you have heard is a very nice way to wrap up the case. As you may have noticed yourself, the candidate's final recommendation part was very brief, but nevertheless with a lot of detailed action items. And I would grade this recommendation as an A. Just to reiterate, the candidate stated his observation that the revenue has been up, but profit has been down, then explained the key reason of the observation, and then gave specific recommendations. Instead of just simply saying, we can market these sauces for different uses, or we can do a joint venture, this candidate gave a very specific example of how to market them in different uses, and a very specific example of a joint venture that can be set up. So great job there. I want to shift gears a little bit here and shed some light on a question that I have been receiving on the final recommendation part of the case, which is the need to add some risks and next steps after your recommendation. Here the risks are setbacks that might happen with your recommendation, and next steps are even further action items to either mitigate the risk or things to do afterwards. So my assessment of that is that the risks and the next steps are actually not mandatory in a case interview and is solely dependent on the length of your recommendation. Adding risks and next steps can either help you or hurt you. If you already have a very detailed and rather long recommendation, adding extra things can make it rather verbose, whereas if your initial recommendation is rather short, adding risks and next steps can help you and add meat to your delivery. So use risks and next steps at your own discretion. But overall, as I have said at the beginning of this case, this candidate did rather well, and I would give this performance an A, meaning that the candidate has a strong chance of getting an offer at a top consulting firm. As a matter of fact, I recently heard from this candidate, and he actually did get an offer from the Boston Consulting Group. So this wraps up the case.